So today we're continuing our reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, entitled The Cosmic Manifestation. And we are on the final chapter, number 10. Srimad Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. And today we'll cover verses 17 through 19. Please repeat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So we'll chant responsively text 17. Please repeat. Prane shoot trid.
Pranena Shivata Sudrid.
Pranena kshipata shoot trid.
Pranena Shivata Sudrid.
Antara jayate vibho.
Andara Jayate Vibho.
Antara jayate vibho.
Andara Jayate Vibho.
Vipasato jakshatascha.
Vipasato Jaksatascha.
Vipasato jakshatascha.
Vipasato Jaksatascha.
Pranmukam niravidyata.
Pranmukam Niravidya.
Pranmukam niravidyata.
Pranmukam Niravidyata.
Pranena kshipata kshutre.
Pranena Shivata Sudrid.
Antara jayate vibho.
Antara Jayate Vibho.
Vipasato jakshatascha.
Vipasato Jaksatascha.
Pranmukam niravidyata.
Pranmukam Niravidyata.
Please chant.
Pranena kshipata shrutir
Pranena Shivata Sudrid.
antara jayate vibho
Antara Jayate Vibho.
vipasato jakshataksha
Vipasato Jaksatascha.
pramukam niravidyata
Pranmukam Niravidyata. Pranane Shivata Sudrid.
Pranena kshipata kshutre.
Antara Jayate Vibho.
Antara jayate vibho.
Vipasato Jaksatascha.
Vipasato jakshatascha.
Pranmukam Niravidyata.
Pranmukam niravidyata.
Pranena Shivata Sudrid. Antara Jayate Vibho. Vipasato Jaksatascha. Pranmukam Niravidyata.
Anybody else? Word for word synonyms, please repeat. Pranena.
Pranena.
By the living force.
By the living force.
Akshipata.
Akshipata.
Being agitated.
Being agitated.
Shut.
Shut.
Hunger.
Hunger.
Shrit.
Shrit.
Thirst.
Thirst.
Antara.
Antara.
From within.
From within.
Jayate.
Jayate.
Generates.
Generate.
Vibho.
Vibho.
Of the Supreme.
All spring.
Vipassata.
Vipassata.
Being desirous to quench the thirst.
Being desirous to quench the thirst.
Jakshata.
Jakshata.
Being desirous to eat.
Being desirous to eat.
Cha. And. Prak. At first. Mukam. The mouth. Niravidyata.
Niravidyata.
Was opened. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The living force, being agitated by the Virat Purusha, generated hunger and thirst. And when he desired to drink and eat, the mouth opened. Purport: the process by which all living beings in the womb of the mother develop their sense organs and sense perceptions appears to follow the same principles. In the case of the Virat Purusha, the sum total of all living entities. Therefore, the supreme cause of all generation is not impersonal or without desire. The desires for all kinds of sense perception and sense organs exist in the Supreme. and thus they take place in the individual persons. This desire is the nature of the Supreme Living Being, the Absolute Truth. Because he has the sum total of all mouths, the individual living entities have mouths. Similarly with all other senses and sense organs. Here, the mouth is the symbolic representation of all sense organs, for the same principles apply to the others also. So a very important, simple but important point that's brought up in Srila Prabhupada's purport here is that from the living force, not from matter, but from the living force, which is spiritual, comes all desires for sense perception and sense organs. In other words, we want the instruments with which to perceive sense perceptions, sense gratification of different types. So Prabhupada began this purport with also a significant point. He said the process by which all living beings in the womb of the mother develop their sense organs and sense perceptions appears to follow the same principles as in the case of the Brahma Purusha. So embryology is a big field. I mean, forever, since the beginning of time, humans as well as other animals have been having children. And the process of having a baby is like, just happens. Pregnancy in the womb, and everybody knows, oh, the mother's womb is expanding, the baby's growing, and one day the baby comes out, full grown, completely formed, everything. But we don't have vision to see within the womb what's happening. But with modern science, they do have their little cameras and their little scopes and, you know, whatever they have to see actually the embryo forming in the womb. And I don't know if you've seen pictures of it, but it's not like pretty or anything. It's actually kind of ugly. Like you see a picture of the embryo and it's literally a quarter inch or a half an inch big. And it just looks like, you know, I don't know what to say, like some gooey thing you see out in nature, you know. You can't tell if it's a bird or a mammal or a human or a cockroach. I mean, it's just like it's little massive. But then as it grows, it only needs to get, I don't know, maybe an inch big. You start seeing things forming. And gradually they take pictures, you know, every week or whatever. And they marvel at, just see how amazing DNA is. DNA is so amazing. Just see how from a globule that had no visible structure, rhyme, or reason to it, somehow or other. And they say all the cells, I think they call it a zygote, at the very beginning when the potential embryo is just like a little glob of so many cells, it's really, really small. And they say they're all the same. All the cells are identical. They have the same DNA, they have the same everything. But miraculously, they can't figure this point out yet. This is where embryologists are stumped. They can't figure out why that zygote at a particular point starts manifesting different types of cells. They're not all identical. Like these over here start forming a spine. And these over here start forming skin cells. And these over here start forming bone cells and brain cells and, you know, tissues of all. And all this variety comes. And when they study different human embryos, take their pictures and everything, it all happens the same. Whether it's your womb or not your womb or your womb, it all happens identically. And they can't figure out what makes cells that seemingly are all identical to just all of a sudden start manifesting different tissues and organs and what have you. So, although it seems like a sentence that we just pass over, this is a significant purport here in the Bhagavatam. Because in this purport, Prabhupada's making the point that the process, the supreme cause of all generation, is not impersonal or without desire. The scientists will never be able to figure out why do different sense organs develop when all the original cells in that zygote have identical DNA and identical everything. Why do they decide to departmentalize and compartmentalize and form different types of tissues and parts of the body? So here, Srimad Bhagavatam, remember what's the title of this chapter that we're reading? Srimad Bhagavatam's the answer to all questions. So all you embryologists out here, come over here. Please attend Srimad Bhagavatam class. Because Bhagavatam's going to answer your question. You don't have to spend billions of dollars doing research. Bhagavatam's going to tell you. Because at the core of it all, you might not be able to see it with your microscopes, but at the core of it all, there's a person. Means there's a spiritual force which has desire. And based on that existence of desire, and desire and the living entity are inseparable. What's the difference between you, an atomic jivatma, and an atom of carbon? Nothing. The only difference between you and an atom of carbon, or hydrogen, or oxygen, or whatever, is that you, the jivatma, has the quality of desire. Dead matter does not have desire. So, only because of desire, different sense organs form to fulfill different sense desires. So here Prabhupada's making that point, that we're hearing, it seems a little bit boring, this section of the Bhagavatam seems a little bit like, oh my God, this is not nectar. Hearing about how the Virat Rupa, see this canto began with the first step in God realization. And what was that first step in God realization? Was acknowledging the universal form of the Lord called the Virat Rupa. He's the Virat Purusha. Because right now we're just like atheists. We think everything's matter, everything happens by chance, no explanation, blah, blah, blah. So the first step in God realization is to acknowledge that this is not impersonal. There's a Virat Purusha behind all of this. So in this chapter, we're ending the canto by hearing how that Virat Rupa is a person. The proof that the Virat Rupa is a person is that he has desires. What does he have desires for? I want to taste things. I want to hear things. I want to see things. I want to smell things. I want to touch things. So we're hearing in this chapter how the Virat Rupa, due to desire to taste, opened its mouth, his mouth. So that's the important point in this purport, is that all bodies are formed around desire, and so the Virat Rupa is also formed around desire. I thought we could do 2 more verses, just because they're tied in together. So, with your permission, we move on to text 18. Mukatas kalu nirvinam jiva tatropajayate tatona navasodya jage jivaya yodi kamyate. From the mouth of the Purusha, from the mouth the palate became manifested, and thereupon the tongue was also generated. After this, all the different tastes came into existence, so that the tongue can relish them. Why are tastes in existence? So the tongue can relish them. Why does the tongue need to relish tastes? Because the person behind the tongue, the owner of the tongue, desires to taste. So all sense objects in this world only exist due to the fact that some living entity, one or more, are desiring them. So the phenomenal world is a product of our desires. Purport: this gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling deities, Adidaiva, because Varuna is the controlling deity for all relishable juices. So it was not explicitly stated in this text that not only was the palate manifested and the tongue was manifested and different tastes were manifested, it was not explicitly stated that Varuna Dev was manifested. But Prabhupada is following the line of previous acharyas who have commented on these verses. He says that this description, this verse, suggests the explanation of the controlling deities, because Varuna is the controlling deity for all relishable juices. Because we understand, as read elsewhere, that behind every sense action, there's a controlling deity. You cannot open your eyes and see without the sun god providing light. You cannot taste all the different wonderful flavors out there if it wasn't for Varuna Dev, because he's the god of the water, and only due to water on the tongue is there the ability to taste. A dry tongue cannot taste anything. So like that, all the different senses have a controlling deity. We spoke last week on that point, that we are totally controlled, even though we think we're being independent. Oh, I want to eat that thing, we eat it. But without the demigods, we can't do anything. So Prabhupada continues, therefore the mouth becomes the resting place for the tongue, which tastes all the different juices, of which the controlling deity is Varuna. This suggests, therefore, that Varuna was also generated along with the development of the tongue. So again, it wasn't explicitly stated, but it's suggested, because we already previously in this chapter, last Tuesday, discussed that there's three beings. There's the Adi Atmika being, the one who's experiencing, phenomena. Then there's the Adi Bhautika being, means when you look in a mirror or you look at others, that form that you see in your eyeball. But it's just the outward dress. And then the Adi Daivika being, which are the demigods, ultimately Vishnu, that control all the Adhyatmika beings. This suggests, therefore, that Varuna was also generated along with the development of the tongue and the palate, being instrumental, are called adibhutam, or forms of matter. So the adibhuta being means just the body, the instrument. It's not that from which desire is generated. But the functioning deity, who is a living entity, is Adidaiva, whereas the person undergoing the function or the experience is Adhyatma. Thus the three categories are also explained as to their birth after the opening of the mouth of the Virat Purusha. And then this last sentence, I don't actually understand it. Prabhupada says, the four principles mentioned in this verse, and I failed to see four principles mentioned in the verse, but serve to explain the three main principles, namely the Adhyatma, Adidaiva, and Adibhutam, as explained before. So maybe he means the four items, the mouth, the palate, the tongue, and taste. Those are the four principles, I guess, that this verse is discussing. And they explain or suggest the existence of these other three, of the three types of beings. Now we'll do text 19. Vivakshur mukato bhunyo vanirvadhyakritantayo jale chetastik suchiram niroda samachayita. When the Supreme desired to speak, speeches were vibrated from the mouth. Then the controlling deity fire was generated from the mouth. But when he, the Supreme, was lying in the water, all these functions remained suspended. Purport. The peculiarity of the gradual development of the different senses is simultaneously supported by their controlling deities. It is to be understood, therefore, that the activities of the sense organs are controlled by the will of the Supreme. The senses are, so to speak, offering a license for the conditioned souls, who are to use them properly under the control of the controlling deity deputed by the Supreme Lord. One who violates such controlling regulations has to be punished by degradation to a lower status of life. So all the senses that we have are given to us as a license, but they're meant to be used properly. Like the government might give you a driver's license. That doesn't mean you get to go out and just drive your car any way you want to, in any direction you want to, at any speed you want to. No, they give you a license. Without a license, you can't even drive. But with a license, you can drive. But here's a whole thick book of rules you have to follow while you're driving. And if you violate those rules, you get a $200 ticket, you might get your license taken away, you might do jail time. Similarly, these senses, the working senses and the knowledge acquiring senses, are given to us with a license. Yes, my dear Jivatma, you can use them to fulfill your desires. But here's the thick book of rules and regulations that you have to follow while you pursue your desires. You want to have children, you want to raise family. Fine, but don't procreate and generate children like the cats and dogs do. Follow the rules of human procreation. You want to eat? Okay, here's the rules of how to eat. You can't just, go kill an animal and eat it. Every activity that we do with our working or knowledge acquiring senses has a whole set of rules and regulations that we have to follow while performing those activities. And if we violate those rules and regulations, guess who suffers? And guess why we suffer? And then we complain, oh, I'm suffering. Why am I suffering? So we can be degraded to a lower status of life. Consider, for example, Prabhupada says, the tongue and its controlling deity, Varuna. The tongue is meant for eating. And men, animals, and birds each have their different tastes because of different licenses. You have a license in your store to sell fruit juice and milk. But in his store, he can sell fruit juice, milk, and beer. Then in her store, she can sell fruit juice, milk, beer, and hard liquor. You can't sell hard liquor in your store. You don't have the license. So every being, man, animal, bird, each have different tastes because of different licenses. The taste of human beings and that of the swine are not on the same level. The controlling deity, however, awards or certifies a particular type of body when the particular living entity develops a taste in terms of different modes of nature. If the human being develops taste without discrimination, as does the swine, then the controlling deity is certainly certified for the next term to award him the body of a swine. Oh, no. Prabhupada says, death means to go to sleep as a man and wake up as a dog. He often says, death is just sleep. Do you sleep at night? Have you ever had deep sleep? Yeah, when you're really exhausted. You know you've been doing a full day of devotional service when you're so exhausted that you fall asleep before your head hits the pillow. And when you wake up with the alarm clock, you're like, what? How many days just passed? So Prabhupada compares death to just deep sleep. He says, but you wake up in the same body when you wake up in the morning. But death means go to sleep as a man or wake up as a dog. And then oh my God, look at me. I'm in the body of a swine. No, how can that happen? Yuck. Fie on those demigods. They gave me the body of a swine. Well, why did you get the body of a swine? Because the controlling deities have it as their job to award you exactly a tailor-made body that's engineered exactly to fit the configuration of your consciousness. Right? In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says like that. That's centered on the mind, the reservoir of all the desires and the conceptions of life and the attachments and the aspirations. Centered on the mind, the living entity acquires a certain type of ear, a certain type of tongue, a certain type of nose, a certain type of eye, a certain type of sense of touch. And then you're called a swine, or you're called a human being, based on the configuration and the type of those senses. So you know I'm to blame but yourself for the low birth. So the controlling deity, however, awards or certifies a particular type of body when the particular living entity develops a taste in terms of different modes of nature. Therefore, the Vedic culture, Varnashrama Dharma, is all about get out of the mode of ignorance. Red light, big red warning signal, danger zone. Don't associate with the mode of ignorance. You're going to fall into the swine species. And please don't even associate with the mode of passion. You're going to take birth among, the horses and monkeys and, whatever, mammals out there. Please associate with the mode of goodness. At least you can take human birth in the next life. Of course, humans are in the mode of passion, but that type of passion that's mixed with goodness at least. So the Vedic culture is all about, stay away from the lower modes of nature. We can't be transcendental, at least exist on the mode of goodness. That's what rabbinical culture means. If the human being develops taste without discrimination, as does the swine, then the controlling deity is certainly certified for the next term to award him the body of a swine. The swine accepts any kind of foodstuff, including stools. And a human being who has developed such indiscriminate taste must be prepared for a degraded life in the next life. Such a life is also God's grace. We always say, oh, I just won the lottery. Krishna's mercy. I just got a beautiful house. Krishna's mercy. I just got a beautiful child. Krishna's mercy. But Prabhupada's saying, when you get the body of a swine, you fall from the human species and find yourself plopped into the body of a swine, you should also say, oh, Krishna's mercy. Thank you, Krishna. Because, Prabhupada says, such a life is also God's grace. Because the conditioned soul desired a body like that for perfectly tasting a particular type of foodstuff. Now, when you're in the body of a swine, you can just go for it. Nobody's going to look at you funny that you're walking around in public naked. As a human, you walk around practically naked and people look at you like, what's wrong with you? And they might even give you a fine, indecent exposure. You can just have, sex right there. on the street in front of everybody. Nobody's going to punish you. You can eat any damn thing. No one's going to punish you. So you're better off with the body of a swine or a dog or whatever. In the human form, you have to worry about all these social rules, what people think about me. And I got to make money so I can afford to pay for an apartment and this and that. You're better off as an animal. It's Krishna's mercy. If a man gets the body of a swine, it must be considered the grace of the Lord, because the Lord awards the facility. After death, the next body is offered by superior control, not blindly. It's not by chance. A human being, therefore, must be on his guard as to what sort of body he's going to have in the next life. Our whole life right now is simply Architecture 101. We are architects of our next body. We have a body. You can't change it. But we can be the architects of our next body. And that's exactly what's the purpose of life? Everybody asks that question. What's the goal of human life? What's the purpose of human life, or life in general?
Understand love Krishna.
Yeah, well, the purpose of human life is to be the architect. The animals cannot go to architecture school. The humans' purpose of life is to be the architect of their future body. And we're hearing about spiritual bodies. We can be the architect so that we get a Satchidananda body. Gopi or Gopa in Goloka Vrindavan. So a human must be on guard as to what sort of body he's going to have in the next life. An irresponsible life of indiscrimination is risky, and that is the declaration of all scriptures. So that ends Srila Prabhupada's purport to text 19. Tomorrow he's reading text 20. Is there any discussion, questions, comments? Usually,
Say that someone dies, and then they take a body of a hog or whatever, those species. It's just like falling asleep and waking up. But if somebody's thrown down into the lower species of life, don't they go to hell?
yeah, so
So it ain't exactly like go to sleep, right?
yeah, it's like that's a good point. Prabhupada said like that. Death is like death. This is a quote from Prabhupada. That death means go to sleep as a man and wake up as a dog. But we also hear that if you're going into lower species, that means you're really sinful, and that means that in between this death and the next birth, you're going to have a nightmare, and that's called visiting the lower planets, where Yamarajas, Yamadutas, subject you to all sorts of nasty punishments in your subtle body, not in a gross body. And depending on whatever sins it is that you're getting punished for, and you're not just getting punished for sins, but you're getting reconditioned to accept this, lower body. Because right now you're accustomed to walking and talking like a human. Now you got to get reconditioned and learn a new language. Woof woof, bark bark, arf arf. You got to learn the dog language. Forget your English or Hindi or whatever you speak. So those visits to the lower planets in the subtle body is both punishment and reconditioning. So yes, those who go to sleep as a man and wake up as a dog have a nightmare in their sleep. So we don't want that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, Maha.
These are the questions that Maharaj is putting to Sukadeva to find out what's going to happen to him.
Yes, because Parikshit is facing death. Most of us aren't even going to ask these questions until we're on our deathbed. But an intelligent human being is supposed to be contemplating these questions and answers from childhood. So Parikshit's inquiring about death. He's a human. He wants to know. He's, even without explicitly asking the exact question, Shukadeva is providing all these answers. And we're going to see in Canto 6 how Parikshit's a little bit overwhelmed when he hears about how, in the 5th canto, he hears about how people go to the lower planets and get punished by the